All right. So my name is Derek, and I am a director of product management at Mailchimp. And I'm here today to talk to you about getting a job in product, and specifically talking about getting a job in product after you've done some other things in your career that probably are not product and probably have very little to do with product uh, on their face. And our job is to figure out how to apply that history to sort of our new career aspirations. So today, I'm going to go through a few different things. I'm going to talk briefly about myself. I'm going to introduce sort of how I think about product and what like the main elements of product management are, and give us sort of a little bit of a shared language. Then I'm going to talk about how we can create our own story that sort of ties to those product elements. And sort of hits a lot of those things. And even if it doesn't seem like you have done product management before, we can figure out a narrative and pull a thread that sort of at least implies why you are a good candidate to do it now. After we figure out how to do that, we'll talk a little bit about identifying good target roles and good target companies. There are ways to be strategic about the search, and being a little bit focused in order to sort of hopefully get that job. And then last, I'll talk a little bit about things that I have found successful in getting jobs. And I'll, I guess, talk a little bit more about my own career first. So super briefly, the thing I want to highlight here, I've worked at a bunch of places. Each of these jobs is incredibly different from all of the others. And so I'll just quickly go through. At Bonobos, I did customer service, literally answering phones and emails. It was my first job out of college, where I studied biology and music. So again, like completely different from what I was trained in. Ultimately was doing like internal consulting stuff here. So like special projects and operations. After that, I pitched to the founder of this kids education company called DIY that he needed an e-commerce business, selling kits and tools and other things to sort of enable all of the kids that were on their platform learning. He ultimately went for it. So my job at DIY was to build a startup within a startup, basically, doing absolutely everything related to goods. So I was doing everything from negotiating with UPS to packing the boxes to designing products with very little experience in how to design things. I did a little bit of like advising, I would say, more than actual product management of the website for the e-commerce things, but sort of jack of all trades in a very real way here. After that, I was a carpenter, building sort of fancy houses out of reclaimed barn timber frames, which had nothing to do with anything again. After that, I really liked the design stuff I was trying to do here, and I was trying to figure out if I really wanted to be an industrial designer. And so I sort of hustled my way into it, and got a job at this little sort of boutique design engineering firm where I learned basically how to be an industrial designer, and pretty quickly got a product to market, and learned a ton about design, and learned also that I didn't really want to do it. That led me into innovation consulting. So basically applying design thinking and design methods to business problems. That's what I was doing at Undercurrent. I did that at Maya Design. Maya ultimately got acquired by BCG, like a big management consulting firm, which is a very weird place to be doing that type of work. I was doing some more like product management style work there, which is super cool. And then ultimately, Mailchimp was my last client at BCG. And I got to Mailchimp and was like, I like all of you a lot more than I like all of us, and sort of made the switch and allowed myself to get poached. And so like a very, very diverse sort of path. That I joke around that, I wouldn't trade any of this for anything, nor would I recommend this exact path to anybody. But I think that's sort of a general, like, I think most product managers that you meet will have some weird varied path to have gotten where they are. Okay, so now that we sort of know that it's possible, actually, one more thing I want to say here, I didn't have the name product manager or like the title product manager until here. So like all of this was very much non-product or product, sort of very adjacent roles, and so, but then it sort of took off for me. And so I really do believe that sort of mid-career product is a totally doable thing. Okay, so what is product? Basically, when you are working with product teams, and when I say product teams, I generally am talking about these two, engineering and design, and a product manager. But the business is super important too, right? And so we are basically sitting in the middle of these three groups, who are all experts. And sort of one way to think about what an expert is they are trained to believe that something is the most important thing. And the tough thing about our job as product managers is that they are all trained to believe something different is the most important thing. The business basically is looking for the biggest opportunity, like how, where can we invest with the longest lever to like basically get the most returns for it, and like what is the most where can we get the most bang for our buck, where's the most value, I guess. Engineering is interested in building robust, elegant software, and good engineers care also that they are working on something that matters, but the craft of writing software is often more important, and sort of the like durability of that software in a lot of ways, and being sort of good at that is a thing that engineers tend to care a lot about. Designers tend to care about where the biggest problem is. They want to serve the biggest need, which is similar to the business looking for the most value or the biggest opportunity, but is sort of fundamentally different in a bunch of ways that you'll see. So product sits right in the middle of all three of those groups, trying to manage the tension between them. And it, tension sort of has a negative sound to it, but it is important. Guitars don't work without tension. You need tension on the strings. Tension is just a fact of the environment, and like our job is to figure out where the right answer is, because it's somewhere in the middle of where all those three groups want it to be. So like at the highest level, product's job is to translate between those three groups, and sort of broker, not deals, but like arrangements between them to figure out like what the most important thing to work on is. Some of the other like elements of product management: gathering evidence for prioritization and doing that prioritization. Our job is not to have the strongest opinion in the room or to boss people around. It's to say, we think this is the most important thing because all of these reasons. And like, if somebody comes up and says, I have evidence that there's something else that's more important, like we should be very okay about sort of following that new recommendation. Research and experimentation, a lot of that is how you get the confidence in build the case for prioritization. Ultimately, we need to build products that users want to use and that the business can support. We do that by talking to the users and paying attention to how they are using our products, or prototypes of our products. The next is data and analytics. That's again, like, how do we know we're right? Or how do we like have the confidence that like this is the right way to spend a very expensive team's time? And some of that is like going through the data and doing analyses and coming up with the insights to say like, things are not as we expect, or this is not working well enough. We need to fix it. Customer centricity, I alluded to it a little bit ago, but like we're building product for people to use, and understanding how they use it and what problems still exist and what problems our product is missing at solving is really important. So being sort of customer obsessed, much more than being competitor obsessed, is really important for product. Problem finding, problem framing, and problem solving are three sort of different skills that good product people are good at. Problem finding is sort of about saying, of all of the things we could work on, if we're going to draw the treasure map of what our product is, like, where are we going to draw that X? Where are we going to decide to dig? Problem framing is really about focusing and sort of peeling off a lot of the other stuff that is nearby that problem, and really reducing scope and really sort of constraining the problem so that people can solve it, you know what I mean, without distraction. It's much better to serially solve a bunch of well-constrained problems than to try and tackle all of them all at once. And then problem solving is obviously figuring out what the product needs to be or what it needs to do in order to address those things. Another thing product managers spend a lot of time doing is managing stakeholders. And stakeholders can take lots of different shapes, but they're basically anybody who is invested in the outcome that your product is trying to drive, and making sure that they are adequately informed and on board and supportive and there to like unblock the team if things come up or when things come up. And that's a very rosy picture of it. There are lots of times when stakeholder management means telling the people whose work is not being prioritized at any given moment that's the case, and there's this other thing that is more important and is a higher priority, and therefore the team is going to work on it first. Here's generally when we can expect to get to the thing that they want. And then team leadership, there's a lot of what product is, which is sitting on a team that you are not the boss of. You don't have any authority over the people who are meant to follow you, who you're meant to lead. And so you do that by influence, and you do that by sort of building your credibility and building your relationships, and getting the team to sort of trust you and follow you. So that's, in a very brief nutshell, a lot of the things that are a part of product management. And what's important for this talk is these are a bunch of sort of hooks that we can go back through our own stories, and hang different pieces of experience on. Because the point, of getting to that product narrative is that we can tell a story that says, look, I know I'm not a product manager yet, but it's actually not as big a stretch as it seems. I've done so many things that feel like product, and here are examples of all of them. And when you sort of put it all together, I've basically done, product management type work, and I really am excited to do product management work now. That's the point of what we're trying to do here. So how do we develop a product narrative? The first thing is sort of inventory your experience. Go back through your own story and think, with that lens of what product management is, what relates to it. When have you led a team? When have you solved a problem? When have you sort of advocated for a thing based on evidence and gotten it prioritized? So go through and make a list of all of the things that sort of feel product like in your own history. Then describe what you did, highlight what you learned. A lot of the successful product interviews that I've been on both sides of these. So like when I'm interviewing somebody and they talk a lot about the things that they learned and ways that they would do better next time, like that strikes a pretty nice chord for me, because product is really about like iterating into the right answer. Nobody knows at the beginning what the right thing is. The point is to like sort of slash scope enough that like it's safe to try building this small version of it, and from that we'll learn and we'll iterate and we'll grow into the right answer. And I think that's a really important point. I think that lots and lots of people try and sort of ship mature products at the very beginning. It is sort of everything you want it to be. And the odds of sort of hitting the target in that way, the odds are low. And you're way better off sort of saying, what's a very small version of it, where we can start learning from our users in public, and listening to them and continuing to build more and more that actually addresses the needs that they have. be self-aware. I think keep in mind that like you're going to be competing against people who have been product managers before. And I think it doesn't do anybody any favors to sort of try and uh, obfuscate that, to hide it. I think it's better to own it and to say like, hey, like, I'm sure you can even say that, like, I'm sure you're interviewing people who have done product before. And I understand that like hiring me will take a little bit of a leap of faith. And my job in this interview is to convince you that that leap of faith is not so great and is actually like safer than you think. Because keep in mind, like hiring managers, there's risk involved every time they hire somebody. They're sort of putting their reputation on the line because they're making the choice about this person that they think is going to be a great addition to the org. And the more that you can do, the more that you like lines basically that you can feed them to go advocate for you when everybody's like, we have 6 people who have done product and this, you want to go with this person who hasn't done it. If you've done a good job telling your story, they'll be well equipped to defend you. And that's sort of a way that we want to be thinking. So that was be self-aware. Speak product's language, like prove that you've done some homework, that you've watched videos, that you've read the books, that you understand what product management is. And the more that you can sort of tell stories using words, using language, using examples that sort of nicely fit into what product managers and sort of product leaders are looking for, the less of a stretch it will seem. And that's what we're going for. And highlight your excitement. Like a lot of hiring a team is like, these are people that we are going to spend a lot of time with. And if somebody is excited and eager and like coachable and has a lot of the right, roughly the right experience, even if it's not the perfect experience, I can teach and I can coach people to be good product managers, given the right set of raw materials. I can't teach people to be excited about it. I can't, and people who are not excited about it are much less coachable. So like really put your best foot forward as far as like showing that you're somebody that they are going to want to work with. So I told you sort of the overall story of my career before. And I thought it might be useful for me to highlight sort of mining my own experience and going back through and saying like, here are the things that I've pulled out of my own background that I tell when I, am telling my product story. Okay. So, I studied biology and music in school. When I say that, I'm doing 2 things. One, I'm showing that I am like, have always been somebody who has had like a interesting sort of, different things happening at once. So biology is like a very traditional thing and music is a very artsy thing. And like, I did both of them. The other thing I say when I talk about having studied biology is like, I love science. Like I love the scientific method. I love designing experiments. I love being able to ask the world a question and sort of with confidence get an answer back. The reason I didn't stay in biology is because field biology I found to be much more about describing the world around me and much less about solving problems that we were finding. And I really craved that problem solving side of it. It felt like we were always stopping short doing field research. Bonobos, I talk about, basically it was famous, is still famous for having like a really good customer service group. They call them the ninjas. When it was 20 of us, and like I said earlier, like credit cards were not comfortable on the internet. Buying pants on the internet was not common. They basically invested in having smart, well-educated, happy, ambitious people answering phones and emails. And that was my job. And I talked to customers all day long and I really learned how to think like a customer and what empathy means and like why these things that maybe seem trivial at any given moment mean so much to the person that you're talking to. and really understanding like where the feedback's coming from, and we're building a thing for them. So that's what I talk about bonobos. DIY, and I'll talk about a little bit more about DIY in a bit, but when I pitched this startup within a startup that I alluded to earlier, I started out by thinking like, what's a list of things that they probably, I really wanted to work there. I really wanted to work with the founder. I was trying to think of like, what do they need, and they were pre-revenue. They existed basically to expand kids' creative confidence. And so I was like, they should sell kits. And I have a background in e-commerce because I just worked at Bonobos. And so I sort of described a Derek-shaped hole and presented myself and said like, hey, like we can start generating a revenue as soon as we have things in the market. Here are all the reasons I think, here are a bunch of different things I think are exciting about that. Here are a bunch of ideas I have for what kits could look like. So problem finding, problem framing, sort of entrepreneurial spirit, which, the fact that I like had initiative and went and did a thing is what I talk about there. Carpentry, it's interesting, but I often skip it. It just doesn't really add that much. When I was working at 10X, I learned design, and I think going back to that Venn diagram that I showed earlier of design, engineering, and business, I think good product managers tend to be fluent in one of those disciplines, and conversational in the other two, because so much of the job is translating between them. And so when I talk about DIY, I talk about I ground myself and say like, look, I used to be a designer. I learned how to be a designer. I like fell in love with the design process because it basically picked up from my science background. And it, you talk to users and you design experiments, and then you solve the problem. Like you find the problem and then you solve it. And it like connected that dot for me that I really wanted. So that's what I talk about there. Innovation consulting, like design thinking, business strategy, that's where I start alluding to the fact that like, okay, like I've been a designer, now I have spoken business, and understand that, applying design thinking, running workshops, all of these types of things. BCG, is like I said earlier, a weird place to do product, but I got to work on some really cool products there. I was working on an implantable medical device, redesigning the interface software for it so that doctors could program it better than they were. They were sort of confused about it. So that was one thing I worked on. I worked on big telecom apps. I like got exposure to a lot of different types of products, and actually got them to market, which was cool. Much more exposure to business strategy, and team leadership. I ended up leading teams there and was sort of the primary client contact. And so that was when I start talking about the like influence and actually, being able to lead a team and convincing people to sort of follow me into battle. This is where a lot of that came from. And then at Mailchimp, I talk about products that I have shipped while I've been here. I talk about product leadership and sort of the cultural things that I'm trying to do as a product leader. So a couple of things that I want to highlight. I didn't have the title product manager until here. And, I think I said that earlier, but like, this is a lot of years of not doing product stuff. And looking back, like none of this was like me paving the path to be a product manager one day. You know what I mean? I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had just graduated college, and took a job doing customer service because I thought I wanted to work in business and literally couldn't get a job doing anything else. So I answered phones. But looking back, I'm able to say like, oh, like that was a useful thing. And I learned a lot that is very applicable to product management. And I owe a lot of how I think about customers and how I like to talk to customers to the experiences I had with my entry-level customer service job. So the point is, I think everybody can look back on their past and find those things that are useful, and just, spend some time thinking about why it's applicable to product. Okay, so then so we have an idea of who we are. We have an idea of, how what we've done can apply to product. Now we need to figure out who to tell this story to. And some guidelines that I want to propose for how you think about that. Match your skill set to the company. So, I still don't think I could get a job as a product manager at Google, because they basically require everybody to be very technical. And I think like maybe even make you pass it like engineering test. And I couldn't, I just can't, and so I need to cross Google off of my list of places that I should apply, because I'm not an engineer and I never have been. However, there are lots of people who end up in product management from engineering, and Google might actually be a really good place for them to apply, because they're like, yeah, like that's a no-brainer. I used to do that full time. But sort of be sensitive to the places that you're strong and the places that you're weak, and try and align yourself with companies that care about your strengths and are willing to forgive your weaknesses rather than trying to overcome them, especially out of the gate. Company stage, there are the difference between applying to an Amazon or Google or Netflix or these huge storied product companies, and like pitching yourself to a startup founder who's looking at less than 10 people in the entire company. It's a very different thing, and like I can't tell you what to do. I've had sort of mixed success. I think I've had more success, especially when you're asking people to take a leap of faith, when there's less HR involved. So, sort of showing yourself to a founder and just getting them really excited about you. There's not a lot of red tape that they need to deal with to give it a shot. Even if you find somebody who is super excited about you at Spotify, you still need to go through all of the process that they have. And, the more people that you meet, if it really is a stretch for you to get a job, if you're actually underqualified for a job, if you meet a ton of people, like somebody, the consensus is probably going to gather around the fact that, there are lots of other more qualified people. So you can sort of build on a relationship that you're making better at younger companies, I've found. Focus on people. It's sort of what I was just thinking about, where it's just like, applying to jobs where the people or you are excited about the people. I cold emailed the founder of DIY, and basically was like, I really want to work for you. I had found him through sort of unrelated things on the internet, and I was just like, this guy is super cool and I want to like work with him. And then I like figured out how to like talk to him, and he like generously wrote back, and it like one thing led to the next, and ultimately I ended up working there. But again, he was sort of unilaterally able to make the decision. So but that he definitely wasn't posting jobs for somebody to come and do e-commerce at his startup. So if you focus on people, you have a little bit more latitude to sort of create a role for yourself. And then, think about this first job in product as a way to sort of bolster your skills and develop your gaps. It's doesn't have to be the perfect job. It doesn't have to be the like ideal company. It doesn't have to be your dream company. You don't have to like have found a person that you really want to work for, but like sort of the way to think, or one way to think about a career is like with each subsequent step, it should be easier for you to make the next step. So figure out how to like land hard on getting the skills that you want. And so that the next job you apply for after you do the one that you're applying to now will be easier. And that can sort of be preamble to your first product job too. And what I mean by that is, if you're having a really hard time getting product management jobs, try a project management job, or try a UX research job or something like that. I know a lot of people who have moved sort of internally within a company from customer service, from UX research, from project management into product. And so there are sort of these like sneaky side doors that you can sort of align yourself with if you're patient, and I think like if product is really the goal, the name of the game right now is to sort of find ways to get into it, even if knocking on the front door doesn't work. Okay, so now we know who we're going to try and impress and tell our story to. Um, the key for applying is really about showing rather than telling. Um, I've sat through lots of interviews where people are really excited about product and they have told pretty good product stories. Um, and it's a lot of sort of bringing me along to imagine how good they're going to be at this job. And like that works sometimes. The people that I am sort of always impressed with are the people who have clearly done their homework and sort of make some sort of case study of my product. And they say, I've been thinking about your stuff. And here's generally where I think you should head. If it were me, this is where I would head. And here's how I've broken it down and sort of walk me through like a real case study. Like show me what it feels like to work with you. Show me what it feels like. It's going to feel like if you're my product manager. And it doesn't have to be right. You know what I mean? Like there are so many different variations of what the future could be. Like, and I live in the world of all of the things that my product could be one day. Like if you're marginally incorrect about some stuff, like that's fine. I think like it's still interesting and it's fun to like riff on that stuff with a candidate and like watch how they're thinking about it and see how they're thinking through it. Um, so I think like that has worked well for both me and for other people that I've interviewed and ultimately hired. Um, when I was applying for that DIY job, I was talking to Zach and I was basically like, I don't really know what I want to, what I can do for you. I just really want to work there, which is a terrible approach. Um, and he was like, I don't really know either, and the conversation almost ended there. He was generous enough to sort of give me a prompt and basically say, why don't you write up your resume in prose? And basically ask me to tell the story of who I am and what I do and what I'd like to do. Um, and if I said the magic words, we would talk more. And so I sort of took this assignment and was sort of rolling it over in my head, and I like started writing, and I got like one paragraph into writing this thing, and I was just like, the odds of this turning into a job are so bad. Um, and so I started thinking through like, he's going to take whatever I write and sort of scrub it against this list of problems and opportunities he has in his head. And so I was like, I can guess at what some of those problems and opportunities are. Who knows if I'm going to hit the most important ones, but like I switched and started writing that list, and pretty high on the list was like they're pre-revenue. Like they're not making any money and they're like trying to figure out their monetization plan. Um I was like, I have a background in e-commerce. Like I think they should sell kits. I'm excited about kits. And so I started writing an overview and proposal of what a kits business might look like instead of doing the homework assignment he gave me. Um, and so I was, I'm writing this overview and proposal and I'm about to send it to him and just be like, hey, like, what about this? And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to build a prototype. I'm going to mail him kit number one. Um, and basically just say like, this is the business. Like, are you interested in doing this or not? And so I went dark. I didn't tell him I was doing any of this. I like nights and weekends for a month was building a prototype kit of what I thought building, how to build a table lamp was what I ultimately settled on. And I was going to the hardware store and buying all the lamp components, and I was writing all of the directions and the copy for that, and I was drawing all of the like how-to illustrations, and I designed the packaging, and I like designed the experience, and I made this thing, and I like tied it into their skills that they were, that the business was about already, and sort of tied it in, wove it into the experience of DIY that already existed. and I like thought really hard about it. And I was not a designer. I had never done industrial design at this point, and I had never done copywriting, and I was not an illustrator, like I couldn't draw very well, but I could trace, like all of these things. Um, and I like hustled and I like figured out how to make this thing and I mailed it to him and I'm tracking it across the country. And on the day that it was out for delivery in San Francisco, I shot him an email that basically said, like, I'm sure you think I am the biggest flake because I was so gung ho about convincing you to hire me a month ago. And you told me what to do to convince you. And then I didn't do it. And I was like, but instead, I have been working on this other thing. And a proposal of what a kid's business might look like is attached to this email. And a prototype is going to hit your doorstep later today. Here's the tracking number. I can't wait to hear what you think. And ultimately he wrote back and just said, okay, when do you start? Once he had the kit in hand. And flew me to California the week after that to meet the team. And the week after that, I had a job offer and moved to California to like build this startup within a startup. And it was because I showed and didn't tell. I made it very clear what it was going to feel like working with me and what it was, what the business was going to be. He didn't really have to think too hard about imagining what e-commerce could be at DIY. I had showed him. And he went for it. So, I have had good experience doing crazy stuff like that, but it's not about sort of making a fancy resume, right? It's not about sort of like making things like decorating, it's about like really solving the problem. I went to sort of first principles and it was just like, if I were starting his company or, assuming his company, if I were inheriting his company today, what do I think the biggest problems are? And then I solved them. And ultimately it didn't work. Like candidly, like the marketplace was not super successful there. But that was okay. Like I did what I wanted to and I got the job and I was super excited about it. And I worked on it for a year and like made a really good friend out of it. It sort of unlocked a bunch of other stuff in my life. So, the crux of that, the punchline is really like show, don't tell, like find ways and creative ways and memorable ways to stand out from the pack. So that's it. I think good luck. There's a lot there. And I think it's really about sort of applying those product skills and developing those product skills of, figuring out how to tell your own story and finding the things and framing the things within your own experience in order to sort of make an impression, and keep in mind, like, leap of faiths happen all the time, but like acknowledge that that's what it's going to require and sort of meet them there and say like, this is I'm not a traditional applicant, let's say, for this, and I know that, and here's why it's not a big deal, and here's why everything's going to be fine. And I'm just so excited to work together. So I wish you all the best of luck, and I'd love to hear about anything that you all try with this. I would love to hear people showing and not telling more. So don't be a stranger. Thanks.